My name is Marcus Evan. I'm 34. What happened in Vermont wasn't just another RV trip. It was the night everything changed. The remote work lifestyle had always appealed to me. Laptop in hand, coffee brewing, and the open road ahead. Vermont's Green Mountains seemed perfect for my next workcation, especially with fall colors painting the landscape. I'd read about the excellent cell coverage near Burlington, perfect for my software development job. The RV rental process was smooth, almost suspiciously so, with the agent oddly insistent I take Unit E37. Looking back, I should have noticed how his hands trembled when handling the paperwork. I arrived at the Green Mountain campground just as the sun began its descent behind the ancient peaks. The GPS had acted strange for the last 20 miles, repeatedly recalculating. Despite the clear signal, the campground host's cabin was empty, with only a note directing me to spot 13. Something about the handwriting seemed off, too precise, too angular. Still, exhausted from the drive, I pulled into the spot without giving it much thought. The first warning came from an elderly couple walking their dog past my RV. "You shouldn't stay in that spot," the woman said, her eyes fixed on my unit number. Her husband quickly pulled her away, muttering something about not getting involved. I dismissed it as small-town superstition, more focused on setting up my mobile office. The campground's Wi-Fi password, "Stay 7 safe," struck me as oddly specific. As night fell, the forest transformed into a cathedral of shadows. The temperature dropped sharply, unusual for early fall. My breath began fogging the windows. Despite the heater being off, the surrounding RVs were dark and silent, too silent. No TV sounds, no conversations, not even the usual hum of generator. The closest unit, about 50 feet away, appeared abandoned, though I could have sworn I saw movement behind its curtains. The first truly strange things began around midnight. My laptop screen flickered, displaying random sequences of numbers before returning to normal. The RV's carbon monoxide detector chirped once, then twice. Though there was no alert, my phone's screen kept turning on by itself, opening the compass app, the needle spinning wildly. The metal surfaces in the RV felt oddly warm to the touch. Despite the cold outside, that's when I noticed the pattern. What started as a faint humming grew into a distinct geometric shape of light, hovering just outside my bedroom window. The shape pulsed with an inner glow, casting impossible shadows that moved against the natural direction of light. As I reached for my phone to record it, every electronic device in the RV suddenly powered on. Radio, microwave, even the disconnected TV. Then, through the static, I heard something that made my blood freeze. My own voice, speaking words I hadn't yet said. The static-filled recording of my voice continued, describing events that hadn't happened, couldn't have happened. Day 3. Marks are spreading. My voice crackled through the devices. They're coming through the walls now. I checked the RV's wall calendar, September 15th. According to the recording, these events would unfold on September 17th. My hands shook as I tried to document everything with my phone's camera. Morning brought momentary relief, and I tried to rationalize the night's events. Sleep deprivation, stress from work, maybe some bad coffee. Anything to explain away the impossible things I'd witnessed. The elderly couple was nowhere to be seen. Their RV spot now empty except for a single dog toy left behind. The campground host's cabin remained deserted, though fresh tire tracks marked the gravel outside. I told myself these were all normal occurrences at a campground. The calm lasted until I checked my laptop's files from the previous night. Every screenshot, every photo, every video was corrupted, except for one. A single image remained intact. A perfect geometric pattern, identical to the light I'd seen. But this photo was dated 3 weeks in the future. My laptop's activity log showed it had been uploading data all night. Though the Wi-Fi had been disconnected, the sent files were massive, but I couldn't find them anywhere on my system. Physical evidence began manifesting in ways I couldn't ignore. The RV's metal exterior now bore a faint pattern, like a giant fingerprint made of microscopic geometric shapes. My own fingerprints triggered my phone's pattern not recognized error on the bathroom mirror. Impossible condensation formed in the same geometric pattern I'd seen in the light, even after I wiped it clean. Most disturbing were the small, perfectly triangular burns appearing on the RV's ceiling. The equipment failures escalated beyond mere inconvenience. My noise-canceling headphones picked up a rhythm in the static, a pattern that matched my heartbeat, but delayed by exactly 3 seconds. The RV's electrical system developed a life of its own, with lights blinking in sequences that, when transcribed, formed binary code. My watch stopped at 3:33, yet continued to function, counting seconds that didn't advance the hands. Every compass pointed to a different north. Through the static of my radio, I began piecing together fragments of other people's stories. Calls to park rangers about missing time. Reports of geometric burns found on other RVs. A pattern of disappearances, all involving unit numbers that added up to 11, like mine. 1 part, 11. As this realization hit, every electronic device went dead. In the sudden silence, I heard something massive moving outside, and a light began seeping through the walls. From the inside out, the light brought with it an oppressive silence, as if sound itself was being absorbed. My ears popped from a sudden pressure change, and the geometric patterns on the walls began to pulse in sync with my panicked heartbeat. The RV's interior dimensions seemed to shift subtly, corners no longer meeting at right angles. I tried calling emergency services, but my phone only showed the compass app, its needle now pointing straight up. Escape should have been simple. Just start the RV and drive away. But the engine refused to turn over, each attempt producing a sound like distant whale song. The door handle felt wrong to the touch, its metal surface rippling like liquid mercury. Through the windows, I could see other empty RVs, their surfaces covered in the same geometric patterns that were spreading across mine. The campground itself seemed to have changed, the roads now forming impossible loops that always led back to my spot. In my desperate search for answers, I discovered a hidden compartment under the RV's bed. Inside was a journal, its pages filled with similar accounts spanning decades. Each entry ended abruptly, the final words always the same. They come through the walls. The most recent entry was dated 1 week ago, written in the same angular handwriting as the check-in note. More disturbing were the photos paper-clipped to the pages, showing people standing in front of unit number 137, my RV. In different decades, all wearing my exact clothes, the first direct contact happened when I was documenting the patterns. Something pressed against the RV's wall from the outside, leaving impressions of hands that had too many fingers. The metal warped and bubbled, forming complex geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly. A high-pitched tone filled the air, and my video recording captured multiple versions of me moving through the RV, each slightly out of sync with my actual movements. Local news archives on my laptop revealed a pattern I hadn't noticed before. Every 11 years, during the fall equinox, a cluster of disappearances occurred in the Green Mountain. RFA Unit 137 appeared in the background of photos spanning back to 1957. Unchanged, unaged, forum posts spoke of temporal anomalies and geometric entities, with coordinates matching my location. Most posts were deleted within hours of being published, leaving only broken links and cached fragments. As night fell again, the truth became unavoidable. The RV wasn't just a vehicle. It was a beacon, a doorway, a trap. The geometric patterns had spread to my skin, burning cold and glowing with the same inner light I'd seen that first night. Through the windshield, I watched as reality itself seemed to fold inward, creating a tunnel of light and angles that defied physics. That's when I heard the voice again, my voice. But this time, it wasn't coming from the radio. It was coming from outside, asking to be let in. The other me spoke with perfect clarity, each word synchronized with the pulsing pattern. let me in," it said. Like all the others did, through the warped windows, I could see its silhouette, a perfect mirror image except for the geometry glowing beneath its skin. The air crackled with static electricity, and every reflective surface in the RV showed a different version of events unfolding simultaneously. Each reflection revealed a different choice, a different outcome, a different fate. Survival instinct kicked in as the entity began methodically testing each entrance. I barricaded myself in the bathroom, the only space still free of geometric patterns. My phone's compass app continued pointing upward, the degree reading now displaying countdown numbers. Outside, multiple sets of footsteps circled the RV, some walking on the walls, others on the ceiling. The metal surfaces rippled like water wherever they stepped, leaving behind burning geometric impressions. The direct encounter came when reality cracked like glass. Through the fractures, I saw them clearly for the first time. Beings of pure geometry and light, folding through dimensions as easily as we walk through air. They moved with precise, angular motion, each step distorting space around them. My doppelganger led them, its form flickering between human and something else entirely. The patterns on my skin burned brighter in their presence, resonating with their movement. The choice between fight or flight was made for me when the bathroom door dissolved into light. I ran, but physics seemed more like suggestion than law. Corridors extended impossibly, rooms looped back on themselves, and gravity shifted with each step. The beings followed with mathematical precision, herding me through the fracturing space of the RV. Each time I passed a window, I saw a different time of day, a different season, a different year. Time stretched and compressed as the chase continued. I experienced the same moments repeatedly, each iteration slightly different. Sometimes I hid, sometimes I ran, sometimes I fought back, but they remained constant, unchanging in their geometric perfection. The patterns on my skin spread with each loop, and I began to understand their purpose. They weren't just marking me, they were rewriting me, preparing me for something. My reflection showed my form becoming less human with each passing moment. In the most intense moment, as they finally cornered me in what used to be the bedroom, I saw through the windshield that I wasn't their first victim of the night. Other RVs in the campground were undergoing the same transformation, their occupants visible through windows that looked into different times. Some were just beginning their ordeals, others were nearing their end. All of us caught in overlapping loops of the same cosmic trap. As geometric light filled the RV completely, I made one last attempt to warn others. I hit send on my phone's final message. When consciousness returned, I found myself in the RV, parked in my driveway at home. The calendar showed September 18th. 3 days had passed, though I remembered every moment of the geometric eternity I'd experienced. The RV appeared normal, its metal surfaces smooth and unmarked. Only my phone held any evidence of what had happened, containing a single video file I don't remember recording. Initial relief at my escape faded as I noticed the changes. My reflection showed subtle geometric patterns beneath my skin, visible only in certain lights. Electronics acted strangely around me. Screens flickered, speakers picked up impossible frequencies, and compasses spun in my presence. I called the rental company about unit NARM 137, only to be told they had no record of such a vehicle in their fleet. The Green Mountain campground didn't exist in any database. The physical marks remained as proof of my encounter. Perfect geometric scars traced patterns across my skin, glowing faintly in the dark. My fingerprints had changed, now containing microscopic fractals that no scanner could process. Most disturbing were the moments when I caught my reflection moving independently, or found myself speaking words I hadn't yet thought of. Time around me became fluid, with moments of déjà vu stretching into hours. Further investigation revealed similar cases across decades. Message boards filled with accounts of RV Unit 137 appearing at campgrounds nationwide, always preceding disappearances, Some survivors shared photos of geometric scars matching mine, while others reported temporal anomalies in their present. Many of these people later vanished, their final posts describing lights coming through walls and voices that spoke from different times. The connections formed a larger pattern I was only beginning to understand. The beings weren't simply taking people, they were creating conduits, living doorways between dimensions. Each survivor carried a piece of their geometry, spreading their influence like a virus through time and space. The campground was just one of many nodes in their network, with unit number 137 serving as a mobile threshold for their incursion. 1 week after my return, I received an email from myself. Dated 11 years in the future, it contained only a video file and the words, "We are ready." The video showed thousands of people standing in formation, their skin bearing geometric pattern, all facing upward as the sky filled with impossible angles of light. As I watched, I felt the patterns under my skin begin to burn and pulse. My reflection smiled with too many angles, and somewhere nearby, I heard the familiar hum of an RV engine starting up. If you're reading this, stay away from Unit 137. But know this, it may already be too late. Check your reflection carefully. My name is Michael Rodriguez. I'm 42. What happened in New York wasn't just another RV trip. It was the night everything changed. The divorce had hit Tommy hard. 13 is a tough age to watch your family split apart. The counselor suggested a father-son trip, something to rebuild our connection away from screens and distraction. I chose the Adirondacks, remembering my own father taking me camping there decades ago. The RV seemed like a perfect compromise between Tommy's need for modern comforts and my hope for wilderness bonding. When the rental agent offered Unit 313 at half price, it felt like a sign things were finally turning around. Getting Tommy to look up from his phone during the drive proved challenging, but something changed as we entered the mountain roads. His noise-canceling headphones, usually his shield against the world, started picking up strange frequency, whispers that shouldn't have been there. He yanked them off, startled, and, for the first time in months, actually looked at me. "Dad," he said, "something's wrong with my playlist." The static continued even after he turned the headphones off completely. The first real warning came at the ranger station. The old man at the desk froze when I mentioned our unit number, his friendly smile vanishing. His eyes darted between Tommy and me before he stammered something about alternate sites being available. When I insisted on keeping our original booking, he reluctantly processed our permit. His hands trembling as he marked our assigned spot on the map, he circled the location twice, then drew a strange symbol in the margin, something like a twisted radio tower. Night fell early in the mountain, shadows stretching like grasping fingers across the campground. The surrounding RVs were oddly spaced, too far apart for casual conversation, each sitting in its own pool of artificial light. Tommy noticed it first, the way every site had a single adult and child, no complete family. His observation sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the mountain air. The closest unit mirrored ours exactly. Father, son, same model RAV. But something about their silhouettes seemed wrong. Too angular, too still. The strange events began with sound, or rather, its absence. The usual nighttime chorus of insects and wind died away, replaced by a deep, subsonic hum that we felt more than heard. Tommy's phone, despite having no signal, kept trying to open his voice recorder app. When he finally let it run, the playback contained fragments of conversations we hadn't yet had. My own voice, distant and distorted, discussing things I'd only thought about saying to him. The timestamp on the recordings showed tomorrow's date. A knock on our door shattered the growing tension. Sharp, precise, metallic. Through the window, I saw the father from the mirror site Arav, standing impossibly straight. Tommy grabbed my arm, pointing at the man's feet. They didn't quite touch the ground. Before I could process this, every electronic device in our RV activated simultaneously. each playing a different fragment of tomorrow's conversation. Over the cacophony, I heard Tommy whisper, "Dad, look at his shadow. It's moving the wrong way." The hovering figure outside remained perfectly still as every recording played through our devices. Each fragment revealed conversations about choices we hadn't made yet, argument, reconciliation, desperate plans. Most disturbing were the sounds of running, of panic, of Tommy calling out for me in the dark. The figure's shadow stretched toward our RARV, moving against the moonlight, reaching for the door handle. I pulled Tommy away from the windows just as our unit's power cut out completely. Morning brought false normalcy and desperate rationalization. Tommy's recorded voice had mentioned something about mirror family and replacement cycles. I caught him researching local history on his phone, diving into forums about missing family pairs in the Adirondacks. The timestamps on his searches appeared wrong, some from next week, others from years ago. His browser history showed pages he hadn't visited yet, filled with warnings about Unit 313 and its collection pattern. But what really shook me was finding my own username on posts I hadn't written, describing events we hadn't yet experienced. The inexplicable events accumulated like static in the air. Tommy's voice recordings captured conversations from different times simultaneously, my voice overlapping with itself, discussing escape plans that hadn't happened alongside memories we hadn't made. The RV's radio picked up impossible broadcasts, weather reports from different decades, emergency alerts for disasters that never occurred, and most chillingly, a children's show interrupted by sounds of families running through endless metal corridors, all signals traced back to a frequency that shouldn't have existed, 31.3 MHz, physical evidence mounted in ways I couldn't ignore. Tommy's photographs showed impossible doubles, each image containing versions of us at different ages, all taken in the same spot. The MirrorSight RV appeared in every shot, but its unit number changed between photographs. 313, 133, 331. Footprints outside our door alternated between adult and child sizes, forming perfect circles that spiraled inward. Most disturbing were the marks appearing on our hands, identical patterns that only showed under Tommy's UV photography light, revealing symbols that matched the ranger's mysterious map marking. Our electronics developed a consciousness that felt malevolent. Screens displayed corrupted images of father-son pairs throughout history, all standing in front of various Unit 313. Tommy's phone kept connecting to his own future voicemail, each message more desperate than the last. The RV's systems created feedback loops of our conversation, building a database of our voices that something seemed to be learning from. Each glitch revealed more mirror families in the campground, all trapped in their own versions of our situation. Through the static and temporal distortions, we began piecing together a horrifying pattern. Every 11 years, the Adirondacks attracted broken families, always a parent and child, always healing from loss. Unit 313 appeared at different campgrounds, offering half-price redemption that transformed into eternal repetition. As this realization hit, Tommy's phone played its final future message, his voice, aged by decade, warning us about the night everything finally connected. Outside, the Mirror family approached, their movements now perfectly synchronized with ours, their faces becoming clearer with each step. They looked exactly like us, only older. Worn by years of searching for replacements, time began slipping between moments like bad radio reception. Fragments of past and future bled into our present. Tommy as a toddler hiding from argument, teenage Tommy running from shadows, elderly Tommy still trapped in this endless loop. The Mirror family pressed against every window now, their forms flickering between ages, each version calling out with our own voices. The RV's walls felt thin against the weight of collapsed time pushing inward. Escape became a maze of recursive impossibility. Every exit led to another version of our campsite, each populated by different iterations of ourselves. Tommy's phone mapped our attempts, its GPS tracking showing impossible paths. We'd walk north for an hour, only to find ourselves approaching our RV from the south. The Mirror family followed each attempt, their movements becoming more precise, more practiced, as if they'd watched countless others try the same routes. Their voices carried fragments of conversations from all possible versions of our lives. Our desperate search for answers led to a hidden compartment under Tommy's bed, filled with journals from other father-son pairs. Each entry described the same pattern: the half-price offer, the Mirror family. The temporal loops, pages, contained photographs spanning centuries, all showing unit number 313 with different pairs standing before it. The final entries consistently ended with the same warning: they don't want to replace us, they want to perfect us. Most disturbing were the family trees sketched in the margins, showing how each pair connected to the next, creating an impossible lineage of lost fathers and sons. The first direct confrontation came when Tommy tried to photograph the Mirror family. His camera captured their true form, not reflections of us, but templates, geometric patterns of potential families cycling through all possible configurations. They moved like time-lapse photography, aging and regressing in fluid motion. The air crackled with static electricity as they pressed their hands against the RV's window, leaving impressions that spread like frost, each pattern containing microscopic images of other trapped families. Their touch caused our own forms to flicker. As if testing different versions of ourselves, research confirmed an ancient pattern we'd stumbled into. Local legends spoke of a family hunt in these mountains, where something ancient collected pairs of broken bonds to study and replicate. The ranger station's records, accessed through Tommy's glitching phone, revealed a perfect grid of disappearances, each point marking where a unit number 313 had appeared. The twisted radio tower symbol marked ley lines of lost family, creating a web of collected relationships that powered something vast and patient. Our coordinates marked the pattern's completion point. As the truth became clear, our options vanished like radio signals in the mountain. The Mirror family wasn't hunting us. They were graduating, completing their cycle by finding replacement. Each pair before us had been practiced, iterations in an endless experiment to perfect the parent-child bond. Through the RV's distorting windows, we watched other units phase through different times, each containing another pair at various stages of realization. Tommy's voice recorder captured their collective discoveries, playing back a chorus of understanding. We weren't camping in the mountains. We were being formatted for storage. The Mirror family's pursuit operated on principles of quantum entanglement. Every movement we made created echoes through other versions of ourselves. They herded us through overlapping timelines, each escape attempt adding another layer to their understanding. Tommy's phone screen showed dozens of radar blips converging on our location, each representing another iteration of our pursuers. The air itself began to compress, heavy with the weight of accumulated possibility. Survival meant outthinking beings that existed in multiple time frames simultaneously. We tried exploiting gaps in their patterns, moments when the various versions of themselves had to synchronize. Tommy's natural understanding of technology proved crucial, as he used his phone to map temporal blind spots. The Mirror family's movements followed perfect geometries, but their pursuit created interference patterns we could briefly slip through. Each successful evasion felt like breaking through static, emerging into pockets of clear time before the corruption caught up. The direct encounter stripped away any remaining doubts about their nature. In a moment of perfect clarity, we saw them as they truly were: collectors of connection, archivists of attachment studying the infinite variations of family bond. Their forms shifted through every possible version of it, from infancy to old age, each iteration precise but fundamentally wrong. They moved by quantum leaps, appearing simultaneously at every point we might flee to. Tommy's camera caught their true form in the ultraviolet spectrum, beings of pure relationship, constructed from the stored patterns of countless collected families, Fight or flight became a question of temporal momentum. We ran through landscapes that shifted between seasons, each path showing us glimpses of other attempts, footprints we hadn't made yet, evidence of escapes we hadn't tried, warnings from versions of ourselves we hadn't become. The Mirror family followed with mathematical precision, their pursuit creating a feedback loop that slowly synchronized our movements with theirs. Each step brought us closer to perfect alignment, our forms beginning to blur at the edges their collection protocol initiated. The intensity peaked as multiple versions of events collapsed into a singular moment. Every iteration of our escape converged, creating a cascade of temporal overlap. Tommy's phone recorded all possible versions simultaneously: success, failure, and every variation between. The Mirror family's forms stabilized into final configuration, no longer shifting, but instead radiating a certainty that pulled at our own reality. Their collected families created a gravity well of relationship, each pair adding to the archive's pull. The air itself began to crystallize with the weight of stored connections in the most critical moment. As the Mirror family's collection field began to envelop us, Tommy made a discovery that changed everything. His phone's corrupted files revealed Unit Number 3130's true purpose, not just collection, but curation. The RV served as a processing node, formatting families for long-term storage in their relationship archive. Through the windshield, we watched other pairs being processed, their bonds extracted and cataloged by beings that had forgotten the difference between studying connections and destroying them. As the field strengthened, Tommy's hand found mine, and he whispered a truth that saved us both. "Dad, they can only take what we let them record." Recovery meant piecing together fragments of overlapped time. We awoke in the ARV, parked in our driveway, my phone showing 3 weeks had passed in a single night. Tommy's camera roll contained thousands of corrupted files, each showing different versions of our escape. The RV appeared normal, but its walls retained a faint geometric pattern visible only in photographs. When we tried to return the unit, we found the rental company had no record of a number 313 ever existing. The immediate aftermath brought subtle changes to our relationship. Conversations carried echoes of quantum possibilities, moments where we'd catch ourselves remembering multiple versions of the same interaction. Tommy's recordings continued picking up temporal bleed, his voicemails occasionally playing messages from paths we hadn't taken. Electronics acted strangely around us, as if our presence created interference patterns in digital signals. Most notably, photographs of us together always showed slight blur, as if our images were still settling into a single timeline. Physical evidence persisted in ways that defied explanation. Our fingerprints had acquired identical fractal pattern, visible only under UV light. Tommy's phone regularly connected to impossible cell towers, receiving signals from other versions of our escape. The ranger station had no record of our stay, but our names appeared in their logs multiple times across different decades. Most disturbing were the moments when our reflections showed alternate versions of ourselves, older, younger, changed by choices we hadn't made. Deeper investigation revealed connections to other survivors. Message boards filled with accounts of Unit NAR 313, appearing at campgrounds nationwide, always offering half-price redemption to struggling families. Survivors reported similar changes, quantum echoes in their relationships, technology glitches, temporal artifacts in family photos. Many of these families later disappeared, their final posts describing perfect synchronicity with mirror versions of themselves. The collection continued, but we'd somehow slipped through their archival process. The pattern pointed to a larger purpose we'd narrowly escaped. The beings weren't simply collecting families. They were creating a database of human connection, storing every possible variation of the parent-child bond. Each collected pair added to their understanding, building an archive of relationship potentials. The campgrounds served as upload points, with Unit 313 converting real bonds into data they could process. Our escape had corrupted their collection protocol, but the archive continued growing. 1 month after our return, Tommy's phone received a video call from itself. The screen showed an infinite grid of father-son pairs, each living out a different version of their relationship in perfect, collected clarity. Among them, we saw the Mirror family. Now, guides for the newly archived, their forms finally settled into the roles they'd practiced through countless iterations. As the video played, our own reflections briefly wavered, showing the versions we'd almost become. Tommy deleted the file, but we both knew the truth. Somewhere in their quantum archive, every possible version of our story continued, perfectly preserved in infinite variation. If you're reading this, check your rental unit number carefully, and if anyone offers you half-price healing for a broken family bond, remember, some things that appear to reflect us actually want to collect us, cataloging every possible version of who we might become. My name is Olivia Parker. I'm 31. What happened in Louisiana wasn't just another RV trip. It was the night everything changed. The university grant seemed too good to be true. Full funding to document Louisiana's disappearing folklore in the heart of Bayou country. My background in anthropology and experience with field recordings made me the perfect candidate. Or so the review board said, looking back. I should have questioned why they insisted I use their designated RV rental, unit number 777, or why they were so specific about which backwater roads to take. The rental agent's thick Creole accent whispered warnings I chose to ignore. They directed me to a remote campground off Route 23. Deep in the swamp where cell service feared to tread, the elderly owner, Mrs. Laveau, raised an eyebrow at my university paperwork, her dark eyes lingering on the grant number. Lucky 7. Lucky 7. Triple luck brings forth the heaven, she hummed, tracing a symbol in the air as she handed me the site map. The Spanish moss hanging from her porch seemed to reach for me as I walked away, swaying against the wind's direction. The first warning materialized in my audio equipment during setup. Testing my field microphones, I caught fragments of voices in the static. Old voices, speaking a mix of French and something older. When I ran the recordings through my audio software, the waveforms formed patterns that looked like ritual symbols. My laptop's translation app kept switching to extinct dialects, trying to decipher words that predated its database. The campground's Wi-Fi password, 7th Sonophason, felt less like coincidence with each passing minute. As sunset painted the bayou in shades of blood and rust, the surrounding swamp transformed into a cathedral of whispers. The local wildlife fell silent, replaced by a rhythm that pulsed beneath the water's surface. The few other RVs in the campground sat dark and still, their windows reflecting impossible angles of fading light. A child's laughter echoed across the water, though Mrs. Laveau had mentioned no children staying at the grounds. Through my camera's viewfinder, I noticed every RV bore the same unit number as mine. The strangeness escalated with the rising moon. My field recordings captured songs in dead languages. Though my microphones were turned off, the RV's metal surfaces vibrated with a low hum that matched the rhythm from the water. Most disturbing was the small handmade doll I found sitting on my doorstep, crafted from Spanish moss and bone, with 7 pins arranged in a pattern I'd seen in my audio waveform. Inside the RV, my research materials had rearranged themselves, pages open to passages about septennial rituals and swamp spirits that needed vessels. A knock on my door broke the night's tension. 3 sets of 7 rapid taps that resonated through the RV's frame. Through the window, I saw Mrs. Laveau standing impossibly straight, surrounded by shapeless forms that could have been shadows or something else entirely. The 7th cycle needs its 7th song, she called out, her voice harmonizing with itself in different timelines. My audio equipment activated spontaneously, playing back a chorus of my own voice repeating words I hadn't spoken yet, counting down in a language I somehow understood. Mrs. Laveau's words triggered a cascade of impossible sounds through my recording equipment. Each device played a different fragment of what seemed like an ancient ritual, rhythmic chanting, overlaid with the sounds of midnight ceremonies held in these same swamps centuries ago. The doll on my doorstep began to leak dark water, each drop hitting the metal steps in a syncopated rhythm that matched the chanting. When I backed away from the door, I noticed my own shadow performing movements I wasn't making. Morning brought no relief, only a suffocating humidity that seemed to trap every sound in amber. My research materials had transformed overnight. Old folklore texts now contained passages I was certain hadn't existed before, all referencing something called the Seventh Vessel Ritual. My recorded interviews with local residents played back differently, their stories shifting to darker versions with each replay. Every photograph I'd taken showed 7 shadowy figures standing in a circle around my Arv. Though I'd seen nothing while shooting, the inexplicable events multiplied like ripples in dark water. My laptop's screen displayed corrupted images that resembled Vave symbols, appearing even after multiple system restarts. The translation software began detecting patterns in the static between radio stations, decoding them into prophecies about the 7th cycle's chosen scholar. My phone's compass spun wildly before settling on 7 different norths, each pointing to another unit, Ivan, visible through the fog. When I tried calling the university, I heard only recordings of myself accepting a role I didn't remember agreeing to. Physical evidence materialized in ways that defied rational explanation. 7 identical dolls now sat in a circle inside my Arv, though all doors and windows remained locked. The Spanish moss hanging from nearby trees had woven itself into complex patterns matching the symbols in my audio waveforms. Most disturbing were the markings appearing on my skin, invisible except when near water, showing fragments of the same ritual text I'd been researching. My field journal filled itself with notes in my handwriting, documenting events that hadn't happened yet. Equipment failures escalated beyond mere technical glitches. Each device began channeling voices from different eras. My phone played recordings of ancient ceremonies, while my laptop speakers whispered accounts of every researcher who'd stayed in Unit 711 before me. The RV's radio picked up broadcasts from impossible years, all discussing the approaching completion of a cycle that had begun centuries ago. The pattern slowly emerged. Every 7 years, a researcher would arrive, drawn by the same grant, staying in the same unit, becoming part of something that had waited generations to complete. Through the layers of recorded history, I pieced together the truth behind my selection. The university grant wasn't funding research. It was fulfilling a contract signed in Spanish moss and midnight rituals. Mrs. Laveau's family had been guiding chosen vessels to this spot for centuries, each one adding their voice to a growing chorus that would culminate with the 7th chosen one. As this realization crystallized, every reflection in the RV showed a different version of myself, each wearing clothes from a different era, all moving their lips in perfect synchronization as they chanted in that ancient tongue. The dolls began to dance. The RV transformed into a threshold between times, its walls sweating dark water that moved against gravity. Each drop contained microscopic images from previous cycles, other researchers, other vessels, other versions of Unit 777 spread across decades. The air grew thick with the weight of accumulated rituals, making it hard to breathe without inhaling memories that weren't mine. Through the windows, I watched as the other RVs in the campground began to bleed together, forming a perfect septagram with my unit at its center. Escape proved impossible as the swamp itself conspired to keep me in place. Every path led back to my aura, the Spanish moss reaching down to guide me in circles. My G-piece mapped these attempts, creating patterns that matched the ritual symbols I'd been studying. Other researchers' journals materialized in my unit, each describing similar attempts to flee, their entries ending with variations of the same revelation. We weren't chosen to document the ritual, we were chosen to become it. The seventh cycle needed 7 voices from 7 times, all converging in one vessel, desperate for answers. I dove deeper into the transformed research material. The folklore I'd been sent to study wasn't dying. It was reaching completion. Ancient texts described a ritual that would bridge 7 points in time, using chosen vessels to channel voices from different eras. The grant committee hadn't selected me for my qualification. They'd chosen me because my voice held frequencies that matched the previous vessels. My audio recordings confirmed this, showing how my speech patterns perfectly harmonized with researchers from 1957, 1964, 1971, 1978, 1985, and 1992. The first direct manifestation happened during my attempts to document everything. The other vessels appeared as reflections at first, then as voices in my recordings, and finally, as solid forms sitting in my RV, 6 women from different decades, each bearing ritual marks identical to mine. They moved in perfect synchronization, their research notes merging with my own. The air crackled with temporal energy as our separate documentations began to weave together, forming a complete grimoire of what we'd been chosen to become. Ancient patterns revealed themselves through our combined research. The swamp had been a place of power long before European contact, its waters holding memories of every ritual performed on its banks. Ms. Laveau's family hadn't created this cycle. They were its caretakers, guiding each vessel to their place in the pattern. Our unit numbers weren't really 777, but rather a single unit echoing through different points in time, collecting the voices needed for something vast and patient. The 7th cycle wasn't ending. It was becoming complete. As night fell again, the truth manifested in harmonized horror. We weren't 7 separate researchers who needed to escape. We were 7 iterations of the same vessel, finally aligning across time. Through the RV's windows, I watched as reality rippled like disturbed water, showing glimpses of every ceremony that had led to this moment. The other vessels rose as one, their forms growing less solid as they approached me. Their voices joined in a chant that made the air itself vibrate, and I felt my own voice joining without my permission, speaking words I'd known before I was born. The pursuit transcended physical space as the ritual reached for completion. The other vessels moved like water-given form, their research materials floating around them in clouds of aged paper and digital displays. They herded me through overlapping layers of the same campground seen across decades, each layer adding another note to the growing chorus. My phone recorded everything, its screen showing 7 different versions of the same moment, converging into a single point of perfect harmony. Survival instincts fought against centuries of carefully laid plans. I tried using my research training to break the pattern, changing my vocal frequency, disrupting the ritual circles, even attempting to record over the crucial harmonies. But each effort was met with counters from other times, the previous vessels having already documented my every attempt at resistance. They moved with the patience of the swamp itself, letting the water's rhythm guide them as they drew ever closer, their forms bleeding together like ink in water. The direct confrontation came as all 7 frequencies aligned. In that moment of crystal clarity, I saw the ritual's true nature. Not a supernatural hunting ground, but a carefully constructed instrument using time itself as its strings. Each vessel was a note in an ancient chord that would resonate with something sleeping in the swamp's depths. The other researchers' forms stabilized into perfect reflections of myself at different ages, their voices combining into a harmony that made reality itself shiver in recognition. Fight or flight became meaningless in the face of what we were becoming. The RV's interior stretched into impossible geometries as temporal boundaries dissolved completely. I ran through moments from every vessel's experience, setting up equipment in 1957, discovering the first doll in 1971, recording EVPs in 1985. The other vessels followed in perfect formation, their movements creating ripples that spread across decades. Every step we took left impressions in time that formed new verses in an endless ritual song. The intensity peaked as multiple layers of reality collapsed into harmony. The swamp's ancient rhythm merged with our heartbeats, pulsing through decades of research equipment. Each vessel contributed their unique frequency to the growing chorus. Phonograph recordings, tape reels, digital audio, all capturing different parts of the same timeless moment. The air itself began to crystallize with the weight of accumulated sound, forming visible patterns that matched the ritual texts we'd all been sent to study. In the most crucial moment, as 7 frequencies converged within my voice, I understood our true purpose. My audio software displayed the combined waveform of all our recordings, a perfect pattern that matched symbols found in prehistoric cave paintings along the bayou. Through windows that looked into 7 different times, I watched other units, Sinan 777, phase into alignment, creating a tuning fork that resonated with something vast and ancient. As the final frequency locked into place, Mrs. Laveau appeared in every timeline simultaneously, her voice harmonizing across centuries. The instrument is ready, and the song must be sung. Consciousness returned like a slow tide, leaving me in an RV parked behind my university's anthropology building. 3 months had passed in what felt like moments, though my research materials documented every second in perfect detail. The recordings remained, but now contained layers of audio visible only in certain frequencies, 7 voices harmonizing across time, creating patterns that made viewers' eyes water. The RV appeared normal until photographed, each image showing it at 7 different points in its history simultaneously. Initial relief at my return dissolved as I noticed the permanent changes. My voice now carried undertones that electronics couldn't quite process, creating feedback loops in any recording equipment nearby. Water surfaces showed reflections of the other vessels when I got too close, their research notes appearing in my handwriting when I tried to document the phenomenon. Most disturbing were the moments when I would unconsciously harmonize with voices only I could hear, my speech patterns matching transcripts from ceremonies performed centuries ago. The physical evidence refused to be rationalized away. My skin bore watermarks that formed ritual texts when submerged. Identical to those found in the other vessel's photographs, my research materials had merged with theirs, creating a document that read differently depending on the reader's place in time. The university had no record of the grant, but my bank account showed regular deposits dating back to 1957. Every recording I made captured 7 versions of my voice, each speaking from a different era about what we'd become. Further investigation revealed the larger pattern we'd completed. Academic databases contained references to similar rituals worldwide, each using 7 vessels to create harmonic bridges across time. Other researchers reported comparable experiences with numbered vehicles and recursive grant proposal. Many of these accounts ended abruptly, their final notes describing perfect harmony with voices from other eras. The ritual we'd completed was just one note in a larger chord being tuned across the globe. The connections formed a pattern too vast to fully comprehend. The vessels weren't just conducting research, we were being conducted, arranged into a temporal orchestra by something that knew how to play time itself. Each cycle of 7 created a perfect frequency, resonating with others around the world. The swamp's waters carried our harmony downstream, adding it to a growing chorus that had been building for millennia. Our academic pursuit had never been the point. Our voices were. 6 months after my return, I received a package containing 7 identical thumb drives, each postmarked from a different decade. They contained a single audio file that played differently for each listener. Some heard ancient ceremonies, others caught fragments of future rituals, while others still recognized their own voices waiting to join the chorus. As I played the file, Water surfaces nearby rippled in perfect rhythm, and I felt the other vessel's frequencies resonating within my own voice. Somewhere in the swamp, Unit 777 waited for the next cycle, while Mrs. Laveau's family prepared to guide another researcher home. The song continues, and we are its eternal echo. If you're reading this, check your grant proposals carefully. My name is David Zhang. I'm 37. What happened in Maine wasn't just another RV trip. It was the night everything changed. The meteorological anomaly was impossible to ignore. Severe snowstorms in Maine during early fall, concentrated specifically in the White Mountains region. As a photographer specializing in extreme weather phenomena, I'd documented blizzards worldwide, but these patterns defied explanation. The storms formed perfect geometric shapes on radar, and satellite imagery showed impossible cold spots that seemed to move with purpose. When I found RV Unit 404 for rent specifically equipped for winter conditions, I should have questioned why it was the only vehicle available. The rental agent's warning came wrapped in technical terms about the RV's unique heating system. It maintains exactly 40,4 degrees Celsius in the cargo area no matter what, she explained, her voice carrying an edge of concern. Previous renters reported unusual thermal readings, she insisted. I take the northern route through the mountain. Marking specific coordinates on my map, the maintenance log showed the vehicle had been returned early 7 times this season, each renter citing equipment malfunction despite finding no actual failure. The first warning manifested in my weather equipment during setup. My digital thermometer displayed impossible readings, showing temperatures that fluctuated between 40-some degrees Celsius and 404 degrees Celsius in perfect intervals. The onboard weather radar picked up storm formations that moved against prevailing winds, creating spiral patterns that centered on my location. Most disturbing was my thermal camera's display. It showed heat signatures in the surrounding woods, each exactly 40-so-4 degrees, moving in geometric patterns through the deepening snow. Night arrived with an unnatural suddenness, the temperature plummeting as shadows stretched across virgin snow. The storm intensified, but the snowfall followed a precise mathematical pattern, each flake landing in perfect crystalline formation that seemed to communicate in cold geometry. Through my camera's viewfinder, I noticed dark figures standing motionless in the trees, their forms perfectly symmetrical, leaving no footprints in the snow below them. The RV's external temperature display flashed between numbers that, when converted to text, spelled out warnings in binary. Strange phenomena escalated with the storm's intensity. My weather station recorded precise patterns of temperature fluctuations that, when graphed, formed complex fractal patterns matching the snow crystals outside. The RV's metal surfaces developed impossible frost patterns that grew inward rather than outward. Most disturbing was the discovery of photographs on my camera I hadn't taken. Images of myself setting up equipment, captured from angles that would require the photographer to be hovering above the snow-covered ground. A sudden change in pressure announced their arrival, the air crystallizing into geometric patterns visible to the naked eye. Through windows frosted with mathematical precision, I saw them, figures composed of living snow and cold geometry, moving with fluid grace across the storm-swept landscape. At exactly 4:04 a.m., every digital device displayed the same message: calibration complete, subject located, beginning collection protocol. The snow beneath my RV shifted as something vast and geometrically perfect began to rise through layers of mathematical winter. The geometric entities moved with crystalline precision, each step creating perfect fractals in the snow. My instruments recorded impossible data, temperatures that cycled through mathematical sequences, pressure readings that formed binary messages in their fluctuation. The figures circled my RV in a pattern that, when mapped, created a complex equation in the snow. My cameras captured their true form. beings of pure mathematics given shape through frozen geometry. Using the storm as both camouflage and medium, dawn brought no warmth, only revelations encoded in frost pattern. My weather data showed an algorithmic progression of cold, each temperature drop following perfect mathematical ratios. The RV's systems displayed cascading numbers that, when decoded, revealed fragments of what the entities sought. Previous renters' reports appeared on my laptop, each describing encounters with living equations that hunted through manufactured snow. Every document contained patterns of numbers, 4, 0, 4, repeating endlessly in the metadata, the inexplicable events accumulated in logical sequences. My thermal imaging showed the entity's true nature. They existed as moving equations. Using cold as a physical language, the RV's onboard computer began solving complex mathematical formulas without input, each solution corresponding to a new formation of entities outside. My weather radar mapped their movements, revealing they weren't just walking, they were calculated, each step part of a vast computation using the mountain itself as a processor. Physical evidence materialized with mathematical certainty. Frost patterns inside the RV formed perfect Mandelbrot sets, growing more complex by the hour. My skin developed symmetrical patterns of cold burns, each marking precisely 40.4 degrees colder than body temperature. Most disturbing were the photographs developing in my digital camera, each showing the entities completing different stages of an equation using weather itself as variables, with my RRV serving as the equals sign in their vast calculation. Equipment failures followed predictable patterns of cascading numbers. Each device shut down at temperatures corresponding to significant mathematical constant. The RV's systems calculated pi to increasing decimals before failing, each number appearing as a new entity in the storm. The weather radar's final images showed storm systems arranging themselves into complex equations, solving for a variable that looked increasingly like my RV's unit number, 404. Through the chaos of cascading calculation, I pieced together their purpose. The entities weren't causing storms. They were using natural weather patterns as computational arrays, solving equations that required physical space and organic variable. Previous renters hadn't fled from malfunction, but from being processed as data. Each rental of unit number 404 provided new variables for their eternal mathematics. As this revelation crystallized in frost patterns across my windows, the entities began their final approach, their forms resolving into pure mathematical truth made manifest in snow and purpose. Reality fractured along geometric lines as the entity's calculations reached critical mass. The RV's interior dimensions shifted according to mathematical principle. Angles exceeding 180 degrees, spaces folding through geometric impossibility. Each window looked out on different iterations of the same storm, showing various stages of their complex equation approaching solution. The air itself became thick with number, visible sequences floating in perfect crystalline formation. Escape attempts folded back through calculated space. Every route I plotted on GPS mapped back to Unit 404's coordinates through different mathematical functions. The entities anticipated each move with algorithmic precision, their formations creating solution sets that closed all possible exit vectors. Through the whiteout, I glimpsed other ROVs, each unit, the number 404, from different probability calculation, their occupants frozen in various stages of realization. The storm unified these iterations into one massive computation. Desperate research revealed deep patterns in the mathematics of survival. My laptop connected to impossible networks, downloading weather data from probability spaces where previous renters had escaped. Their solutions proved temporary. Each survival scenario eventually factored back into the entity's greater equation. The RV's maintenance logs showed a perfect pattern. Every seventh renter solved part of their equation. their experiences adding new variables to an ever-growing algorithm of cold and purpose. The first direct computation began when they breached the RV's thermodynamic equation. Their geometries violated physical laws with mathematical precision, transforming my shelter into a three-dimensional graph of their calculation. The air crystallized into visible mathematics, each breath adding new variables to their solution. My cameras captured their methodology. They weren't destroying reality, but solving it, reducing existence to pure numerical truth. Ancient patterns emerged from accumulated data. Weather records showed similar mathematical anomalies throughout history, each instance adding complexity to a calculation spanning centuries. The entities weren't recent phenomena. They were iterative solutions approaching completion, using human observers as organic processors in their vast equation. Unit 404 served as a traveling decimal point, marking locations where reality's mathematics could be solved most efficiently. As night fell again, the truth resolved into perfect geometric clarity. We weren't victims, but variable, carefully selected for our ability to process and document their calculation. Through windows that graphed probability curves in frost, I watched as multiple iterations of my experience factored into their equation. The entities converged from all quantum possibilities, their forms simplifying toward a singular mathematical truth. As they reached absolute zero in their calculations, every surface displayed the same message. Organic processing unit confirmed. Beginning final integration. The pursuit operated on principles of quantum mathematics. Each possible escape route calculated and collapsed before I could attempt it. The entities moved through probability space with geometric precision, herding me through calculated coordinates that plotted a perfect solution path. My instruments tracked their approach through multiple dimensional graphs, each reading corresponding to another facet of their impossible equation. Survival equations grew increasingly complex as reality's mathematics broke down. I tried exploiting gaps in their calculations, seeking variables they couldn't process, but their algorithm adapted with fractal efficiency. The storm intensified according to precise formulas, creating weather patterns that solved for my location across all possible coordinates. Each snowflake contained a microscopic equation, building toward a solution that used my ARV as its final variable. The direct computation stripped away my last doubts about their nature. In perfect clarity, I saw them as they truly were. Living mathematics using weather as a physical interface, solving equations that required organic processing power. Their forms shifted through geometric proofs, each movement demonstrating another theorem about reality's fundamental calculation. They existed as pure mathematical truth, using snow and cold to process complex variables that silicon couldn't handle. Fight or flight became a question of quantum probability. I ran through spaces that folded according to non-Euclidean geometries, each path multiplying possible outcomes that the entities instantly calculated. The RV itself became a moving equation, its physical form representing variables being processed in real time. Through windows that graphed quantum states, I watched other iterations of my escape collapse into singular solutions, each failure adding precision to their pursuit. The intensity peaked as multiple probability spaces collapsed into one perfect equation. Every possible outcome converged on a single solution set, creating a cascade of mathematical certainty that crystallized the air itself. My instruments recorded the final calculation, pure numbers that described existence with absolute precision. The entities' forms stabilized into perfect geometric proofs, their movements describing equations that solved reality itself. In the most crucial moment, as their mathematics reached quantum certainty, I witnessed their true purpose. Through the ARV's frosted windows, I saw other units, Thumb 404, across probability space, each containing another observer helping to process their vast calculation. We weren't random variables, but carefully selected organic processors, chosen for our ability to document and understand. As the final equation approached completion, the entities converged from all possible coordinates, their forms simplifying into a single, perfect mathematical truth. Recovery meant reintegrating into a reality now visibly governed by their mathematics. I awoke in the RV, parked at my designated coordinate, instrument readings showing 3 weeks had passed in calculated intervals. The data remained. Perfect equations written in frost pattern, temperature graphs showing quantum probability curves, photographs of geometric entities moving through solved space. The RV appeared normal until measured, its dimensions still occasionally solving for variables in their ongoing calculation. Initial relief at my return dissolved as I noticed permanent changes in reality's mathematics. Electronic devices calculated pi differently in my presence, finding new decimals that proved correct when tested. Temperatures followed new laws of thermodynamics around me, forming precise patterns that solved for variables I couldn't fully comprehend. Most disturbing were the moments when I caught my own reflection performing calculation, my image working through equations I hadn't known I could solve. Physical evidence persisted in mathematically perfect ways. My skin retained geometric frost patterns that matched theoretical physics equations. Weather instruments near me recorded impossible data that nevertheless proved mathematically sound. The RV's unit number appeared in scientific calculations worldwide, always corresponding to quantum anomalies that solved previously impossible equations. Each piece of evidence added new variables to their ongoing computation. Further investigation revealed connections to other processed observers. Research papers contained accounts of similar entities using weather as a computational medium, each encounter adding complexity to a global equation. Other survivors reported comparable changes, new mathematical abilities, altered thermodynamic properties, quantum insights that shouldn't be possible. Many of these individuals later disappeared into perfect geometric snowstorms, their final messages containing solutions to equations they hadn't known they were solving. The pattern pointed to a vast mathematical purpose we'd been calculated into. The entities weren't simply studying reality, they were solving it, using organic processors to calculate variables that artificial systems couldn't handle. Each encounter added new solutions to their eternal equation. Building toward a proof that would resolve reality's fundamental mathematics, Unit number 404 served as a mobile processing node, converting human observers into living calculators for their impossible computation. 1 month after my return, I received coordinates encoded in a temperature anomaly. The data showed a perfect mathematical pattern spreading across the world's weather system, each storm solving another part of their vast equation. As I processed the information, frost patterns on my skin formed new solutions, and I understood our true role. We weren't just observers of their calculations, we had become part of their living mathematics, processing reality through newly awakened quantum awareness. The equation continues its solution, and winter holds new meanings in its geometric truths. If you're reading this, check your unit numbers for mathematical significance. And if you're offered an RV specially equipped for winter research, remember, some equations aren't meant to be solved by traditional mathematics.